And I always tell people, listen, you believed in Santa Claus for almost 6 years, so why can't you believe in yourself for at least 1 year? We have documented letters and emails from 2,000 teenagers who didn't commit suicide because of our Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul books.
Jack Canfield co-created Chicken Soup for the Soul and wrote The Success Principle. He'll give you habits that compound fast.
Stephen Covey said, you don't want to get to the top of the ladder and find out it was leaning against the wrong wall. So I live in a wealthy neighborhood. I know some of them. They're not happy. They're drinking all the time. They're taking drugs. Their kids are not doing well because they thought the money was going to do it for them, and it didn't. My favorite quote is from Muhammad Ali. He says, impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. You have everything you need in order to achieve anything you want. You wouldn't have the desire to achieve it if it wasn't meant for you to do that.
Welcome to the Swedish Wealth Institute podcast. I'm Daniel Wood, your host, and this is where we connect you to the right mentor at the right time to help you change your life. Today, you're about to learn from one of the greatest teachers of personal development of all time, Jack Canfield, the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul series with over 600 million copies sold, author of The Success Principle, star of The Secret, and a man who's helped millions rewrite their trajectory of their lives with clear, practical, repeatable success strategies. This is someone whose work shaped my journey long before the SWI existed. And in this conversation, Jack shares timeless principles, mindset upgrades, and powerful frameworks that you can apply immediately to accelerate your results in 2025 and beyond. And of course, we're getting into the Christmas season, so I've got something special for you. You're getting a €25 discount on the Cashflow 101 board game, one of the greatest tools ever created for building financial intelligence. So if you want to raise your family's IQ this Christmas and you want to give a meaningful gift, or if you want to strengthen your own financial mindset, this is the game to get. Use the code SWI member. You'll find the link and the discount code in the show notes below. All right, let's dive in. Here's Jack Canfield on success, clarity, purpose, and the principles that create breakthrough results. One thing that really stands out to me is obviously you wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul book, which is a global phenomenon, but it didn't start that way. You got rejected 140 times before it got accepted. Tell us about that process. How did that happen?
It's very interesting. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I started out as a high school teacher, and I learned very early on that when I told stories that were real about my life, about other people, I was teaching in an all-black school, so if I told a real story about Martin Luther King Jr. or someone like that, they were like glued to the front of their seats paying attention. When I was teaching historical facts that they had to memorize, they're looking out the window, they could care less. So I learned early on the power of stories. And then later, I became a self-esteem expert, teaching teachers how to raise the kids' self-esteem in a classroom. And I would tell stories about that. And they would, again, come up and say, you know, that story you told about so-and-so, is that in a book anywhere? My daughter needs to read it. My son needs to hear it. My staff needs to hear it. And I always had to say no. And one day I'm coming home on a plane, and I just kind of hit my head and went, oh, my God, everyone's telling me to put these stories in a book. So I did. And I just decided I'm going to write 2 stories a week for a year, because I had a full-time job running trainings and stuff. And I would write at night, from 10 till midnight. And then a week later, I'd edit those 2 and write 2 more. And so at the end of the year, I had 101. I had more than 100 stories. The whole process of how we narrow that down. But what happened was we now had a book, and I met my co-author, Mark Victor Hansen, about 3/4 of the way through the book.
Who I should mention is actually coming on the podcast as well in the future.
Oh, very good. Yeah, you'll enjoy it. He's really fun. So he meets me for breakfast somewhere, and he says, what are you working on? I told him his book. He says, I want to finish it with you. I said, Mark, that's like telling a novelist you want to finish his novel when he's written 3/4 of it. Why would I do that? And he said, first of all, half the stories you tell you stole from me, which was not true, maybe 5. So then the other thing he said, you only have 70 stories so far. You should have 101. It's a spiritual number. He had studied in India. And so I said, okay, if you can go find 30 stories, deal. So he did. And that's how we got it together. Now we have this book and we got to sell it. And we find a friend who's an agent. We go to New York. We have 21 meetings. Nobody gets goosebumps. No one wants to do it. Short stories don't sell because historically short stories were basically fictional, and they didn't grab you enough, like for a movie script, to really get a big arc of some kind of learning or trajectory of the hero's journey or something like that. So basically, we got rejected, and so what kept us going was we knew our audiences love these stories. And so basically we just kept up, and we would have self-published if we had to. I'm glad we didn't, because I would rather be a writer and an author and a speaker than a publisher and have to warehouse books and deal with all that stuff. So we went to the National Booksellers Association, who was having a conference in Orange County, California, not too far from where we live. And we went from booth to booth to booth in the exhibit area. All the publishers are there selling their books for the next season to the bookstores. This was before Amazon was the big giant. Now there's fewer bookstores. And so we would go to all these publishers and say, would you publish a book? Would you publish a book? And we did that for 2.5 days. And we got, again, we don't do that. We don't know who you guys are, blah, blah, blah. One publisher said, we'll read it. So he read it on the way home and went, I like this book. And that's how we eventually, then he said, but I'd have to know I could sell 20,000 copies. I don't know if I could do that. So Mark and I, this is really cool. We created a sheet, 8.5 by 11 sheet. It said, I promise to buy a blank number of copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul when it comes out. Put your name and address. Nobody had even internet, email addresses at that time. This is 1992 or one when we did it. Book came out in 93. And when we had promises to buy 20,000 books, we took them to our publisher in a big banker's box, put it down on his desk and said, here. And he said, okay. And then we said, how many copies do you think we'll sell? And he said, 20,000. What's your belief? I said, we're going to sell 150 by Christmas and 1.5 million in a year and a half. He laughed out loud. He said, you guys are crazy. He said, no, we're entrepreneurs. We're visionaries. We can do this. And we sold 135,000 by Christmas and 1.3 million in a year and a half. And that's when it took off.
Wow. Well, let's break that down a little bit, because there are so many nuances to this story. Let's start with those initial rejections, because I know so many people, I used to work in sales. One rejection and some people are crushed. 5 rejections and some people are crushed. And you guys kept going. Where did you find that resilience?
Well, Mark had been doing sales trainings for years, so he knew what you're talking about. And I just knew it's kind of like, God comes down and tells you in the next 3 weeks, you're going to meet a girl who you're going to marry. Ask every one of them to do that. Now you have this guarantee it's going to happen. So you just ask. And when they say no, you just go, well, this wasn't that one. It wasn't that one. It wasn't that one. It wasn't that one. Because in your heart, that one is there. It was promised to you. And that's how we felt about the book, that it was going to happen. And that belief, belief is a choice. You can choose to believe whatever you want. And I always tell people, listen, you believed in Santa Claus for almost 6 years. So why can't you believe in yourself for at least 1 year? And
some of us believed even longer. Yeah. Some of us naive people. Yeah.
There you go. And and it's great to believe all that. It's fun. A lot of stuff happened as a result of it. But the point being that we just chose to believe it was going to happen. And from the law of attraction, when you choose to believe something and act on that belief, it sets up a vibration in the universe to fulfill that belief. And obviously you have to take the action. You can't just believe it. You have to act on the belief. And the action actually proves to the universe that you believe it. If I give you a diet and you don't believe it's going to work, you're not going to take action on it. But if I give you one and you have evidence, you go, I think that'll work, then you'll take action. So action is one way you demonstrate your belief and also keep your vibration high. As I said, we were willing to do it ourselves if we had to. We didn't want to, but I just knew in my heart of hearts, because people had responded to those stories. And when you have a passion about something, it's put there for a reason. I believe we're all born with an inborn purpose. And when we're following that purpose, we experience joy. And we had joy when we were doing that. We're getting rejected all over the place. And we go, next. I always tell people, when they say no, you say next. and just keep saying next until someone says yes.
Sorry, I got to ask, what do you tell someone when, they're searching for that certainty? How do you help them find that within them?
I don't know that you find it. I think you have to create it. It's a choice. Life is a series of choices, and each choice has a consequence and an outcome. And what I've done, and what you're about, and why we're having this interview and podcast, whatever, this conversation, is that that. And when you study people who are successful, you realize they kept choosing to keep going. They've had, like Walt Disney went bankrupt uh, several times before he, was successful. Disneyland, he couldn't find investors at the beginning. You know, one investor I actually met later said every time I said no, as we walked across the Orange Grove in Orange County where the Disneyland was built, cost me $1 million every step. I could have been a billionaire, but nobody knew. So you have to believe. You have to choose to believe. Some people believed in Amazon. I didn't. I wish I had. I'd have bought stock. Some people believed in Bitcoin. They're richer than I am now. So those choices to believe. So what I was about to say is, if you study wealthy, successful people, which you do and I do, what happens is you find out these people don't give up. They persevere. They choose to keep going. Now, sometimes your dad or your mom was that person. It was modeled for you. For me, it wasn't. My dad gave up quite a lot. He had a lot of failures in his life, and it was very hard on him. But somehow I just studied people who were successful. I had the wherewithal to read their biographies, to go to their seminars, to these days watch their TED Talks, whatever. And you'll see that the wealthy, successful people choose to persevere. And quite often, it's that one last step beyond when you think you're going to quit that gets you where you want to go. I believe the universe is kind of testing us to see how committed we really are, and to fulfill this purpose we have. Uh, but I also enjoyed it. I like the search, if you will. When we came out with Chicken Soup, one of the next thing was to market it. And I remember starting to call up multi-level marketing companies thinking this would be a good book to motivate people in their downlines selling their products. And I got hung up on. I mean, people would really hang up on me. Don't call here again, kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people would have given up, like you said, after 5 or 6 of those. But about 15 in, Discovery Toys said, send us a copy. We'll read it. They read it. They bought 1,000 copies. They hired me as their keynote speaker to come that year to talk to their conference. Had I given up after, in this case with Chicken Soup, 100, we would not be having this conversation right now.
Did you ever feel a moment of doubt while going through this of like, is this really going to work? Are we right? Or were you just supremely confident the whole time?
I wasn't sure we'd have the level of success we've had. I mean, the fact that it went as big as it did, I was not perceiving that. I thought we could have a best-selling book, we'd make a best-selling list, whatever, for a week or two, whatever. And, our goal though was to sell 1 million books.
And you've obviously done that a few times. Yes.
600 is what I'm told by the publisher, 600 million books in print.
So let's talk about that, because there are so many personal development books that have been written throughout the ages. What did you do that was different? You talk a lot about, your 5 things that you do every day. Like what did you do to stand above the rest?
First of all, because I teach people about writing a best-selling book, and the number one thing I teach them is write a good book. You have to write something that people are going to read, and if they're going to want to say to their friends, you got to read this book. Most books become bestsellers do it because of what is called a friend tells them, a parent tells them. You call your daughter and say, I bought you this book for your birthday. I think you're going to love it. It's that referral marketing, you might call it. People are telling people to do it. I actually wrote a book once called You've Got to Read This Book, which was about that concept, And so what happens is, now, write a good book. And here's what we did. Chicken Soup for the Soul was rewritten 6 times. Every story in there. My poor secretary retyping it every time, because I wasn't typing at the time. I would write it out by hand. She would type it. And what happens was that I would read the last time I went to a ski resort in the summer for 2 days, and all day long I just read the stories out loud. Did it sound good? Did it come trippingly off your tongue, as an actor friend of mine said? Because when you read, unless you're a speed reader, most people, they are sub-vocalizing. They're saying the words in their head. They're hearing the words. And if they doesn't sound right, your brain kind of shuts down a little bit. So basically, and then the other thing we did, and this was an accident that turned into a system, we had 120 stories. We wanted 101. So I asked my staff, my sister, my wife, Mark's staff, etc., read the 120 stories, grade each one on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being amazing, you love it, you called your mother, it made you cry, whatever. And then we gave out a 7, what are you guys smoking dope? Give me a break. Why has this even been in here? And then we put all those onto a spreadsheet because we didn't have Excel at that time. And then we used a calculator, and we averaged out the 20 people that read it, and we got scores. And the top scoring stories made it into the book. 2 of my stories that I wrote did not make it into the book, but it wasn't about my ego. It was about what does the reader say, So feedback, most people do not get enough feedback on a product before they put it into the marketplace. They're afraid of feedback. They're afraid of people saying no, like you said, it's not good enough. We all got graded in school where the teacher would put a big X number. It would say, here stupid is where you were stupid. So we're afraid of that feedback. Why don't you ask your wife on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the quality of our experience of a relationship this week? Most people are afraid their wife's going to say something negative. They don't want to hear it. But how can you make it better if you don't know? So we always say feedback is the breakfast of champions. You have to ask for feedback. So we did that. That was like a fluke that turned into a system. So later, when a book would come to us, we start to collect the stories. We had 20 readers, sometimes 40, Black, white, urban, rural, Midwestern, the 2 coasts, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, non-religious, age groups, Republicans, Democrats, don't vote. We wanted a broad spectrum of people. And then we would send the stories to them, and they would give us the scores back. And then we would basically pick our top 101 stories. So that writing a good book, having a good product, honing your speech, making sure your workshop works before you make it an online click to buy. Does it work in person 10 times, kind of thing. So that's the first thing I would say is you've got to create a good book. Secondly, you've got to market it. And that's where this rule of 5 came in, where every day we would do 5 things to market the book. Call 5 bookstores. Are you carrying our book? Call 5 newspapers. Would you interview us about the book? Send out 5 review copies to TV shows, radio shows. Would you have us on your show? Would you interview us, etc.? Then we bought a book. We found a book called 1001 Ways to Market Your Book by John Kramer, Kremer, if you're wondering. It's still out. He revises it every year. It just came out a new edition. And we made Post-its of 700 of those because 300 didn't apply to our book. It only worked for cookbooks or something like that. Put them on a wall in our office, and every day we'd take one off and do it 5 times. Or if it wasn't something you could do 5 times, we took 5 Post-its off, and we did it before we went to bed that night. So over the course of a year, you're looking at, 1,000.
Yeah, 600, 700. Yeah.
Yeah. Actions. And it'd be like going to a tree with an axe. You hit that 1,000 times with an axe, that tree's coming down, So that was the other thing, I think. And we did that for 3 years in a row. And here's the thing, David, most people don't know, our book did not hit a bestseller list until 14 months after it came out.
Oh, really?
It was that consistent behavior. And what we didn't know was happening is, let's say you buy the book, took you 3 weeks to read it. You'd tell 3 friends or buy 2 copies for your kids or whatever. So every 3 weeks, we'd see this jump in sales, like a chain letter. It just kept jumping and jumping and jumping. And eventually, they were selling tens of thousands of books a week.
Right. And that's comes into those 2 parts of what you were talking about. The book was good enough that you wanted to tell your 3 friends. And then you got it to enough people that 3 friends started making an impact.
And today, what I tell people, you've got to go on podcasts like this one. And what most authors don't realize, I think everyone doesn't realize, is podcasts are actually better than radio shows. Radio shows may reach more people, but a podcast reaches a focused audience. Everyone there wants to know about this topic. Whereas if I'm on a radio show in Boston, maybe 10% of the people are in the personal development. Whereas if I'm on a thing like this, everyone wants to be more successful, wealthier, more abundant, healthier, happier, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is here we're trying to build a relationship with our audience rather than just have someone in a car turn on and to listen to music and they happen to hear us talk.
Yes, exactly.
From this and from your growth, you then created the Transformational Leadership Council. What was that? What was the start of creating that?
Well, what happened was that I was lonely. I know, think back when you started your organization. Who else did you know that were running those kind of organizations? And so, was there an association of people who running organizations like this? And it wasn't. So I was doing experiential education. In other words, I don't just talk at you. We do exercises, and in the exercises, you have aha experiences where you come up with your own conclusion that this is. I need to stop saying the word can't. I need to choose to believe. I need to have a goal. I need to get my life purpose clear. Oh wow, I don't know my life purpose. So there weren't a lot of people doing that work. So basically, I wanted to get together with them and learn about what they were doing, share exercises that we could use. How are they marketing? Excuse me. Could we market to each other's groups, affiliate marketing, etc.? So literally, I was very afraid that everyone was going to say, "No, who are you? Why would I care to join you?" And I invited 30 people to my living room. I have a big living room, and they all came. We spent 3 days together, and out of that, we birthed this organization. Had our first meeting at John Gray's ranch. John Gray, men are from Mars, women are from Venus guy. And then our next meeting was in Colorado. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary. We do 2 meetings a year. We have 140 members from about 16 countries, and we've co-authored books together. We speak at each other's events. We market for each other. Um, you know, just recently, Ken Honda, who if you haven't had him on your show, you should. He wrote a book
He's
called
spoken
Happy
at one of our
Money.
summits. I've reached out to his team to have him come on the show as well.
He's amazing. He invited me to Japan along with John Gray and some other people. We did a whole day seminar for about 800 people. And then I got to go 2 days to sumo wrestling matches and Buddhist weddings and all kinds of wild stuff. It was really fun. So we chose to have people that were successful, that could afford to go to exotic places. We've met in Croatia, we've met in Panama, we're going to meet in Japan in 2027, I think. And met in Ireland and, the Bahamas, Hawaii, so forth. So it's a lot of fun, and it's been very helpful. We share a lot with each other. Like, we come from a position of being what we call a go-giver rather than a go-getter. So everyone in that organization is committed to service, not just making money, not just being successful. And like we've had a couple people, I won't mention their names, but their egos are so big when they walk in the room, they suck all the air out of it. They've not been invited to join, and nobody wants them there because they know that's what would happen. So we want a place where everyone can feel like they support each other and love each other. And now it's like a family reunion. I would hate to miss it. They're just too much fun.
I can imagine. And what's been the biggest impact for you by being a part of or in this case, being the founder of the Transformational Leaders Council?
I think a couple things. Number one, when you found something and it works, then you are elevated in status. So all of a sudden, I'm like one of the top celebrities in the field of human potential because I brought all these people together, and they all celebrate the fact that I did that. The biggest, I would say, career-wise, was being in the movie The Secret, which wouldn't have happened with all the people in it had there not been a Transformational Leadership Council. The story goes that Rhonda Byrne, who produced the movie, wanted to get more people in it than just a few people she had when she started to put it together. So she found out that we were meeting in Colorado. It was our second meeting.
Right.
And could she come and interview? Because all the people she wanted to interview were going to be at our meeting.
Right.
So I said, no. I literally said no because everyone's going to want to be. Some people won't get in. It's going to create all this mishigas. And it'll pull people out of the meetings. And I said, I don't think
Ruin
it's
the
a good
whole
idea.
ambiance.
That's exactly right. And so that I always meditate before I go to bed at night. And I'm meditating, and all of a sudden this voice says, "Tell Rhonda yes."
No.
So I called her up, told her. Fortunately, she came. She recorded, I think, 12 or 15 of us there, and in front of a green screen, and then put all the stuff behind it that she did. And that movie, when it came out, all of us in it wrote to our mailing list saying they should watch the trailer for this movie. 12 million people got an email saying that. And some people got an email from 5 of their favorite self-help gurus. In other words, me, John Ray, Marie Diamond, Ken Hunter, whatever. And they went, my God, if all these people are telling me on the same day I should watch this, maybe I should watch this. And then it went on to sell, literally hundreds of millions of copies of that movie, which got me to do all these. There were secret conferences, like where 500 people would be invited. We'd all make $30,000 or $40,000, go on cruises together, get paid for that. I got invited to Iran, which America doesn't even have an embassy for. I had to go through the Pakistan embassy. They showed the video of The Secret on national television in Iran. How it got past the Ayatollah Khomeini, I have no idea. It did. So I go to Tehran, they have 800 people in a seminar, and they paid me $50,000 to come. So that that was probably the biggest thing I could say measurable in terms of my career.
Direct effect from it. Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of friendships and support, I would say that's the biggest thing, just the camaraderie.
I love that. And I think that's something we all can kind of take with us, that we've had Raymond Aaron come on the show and talk about the difference writing a book, and especially a best-selling book, can have on your career. But as you saw, the next step after that is then to bring together all the superstars of an industry and create that cooperation from it.
I'm going to say something about Raymond, and I'll speak to that as well. So Raymond's a member of the Transformational Leadership Council. And when we decided to publish our book, and remember I said we asked people to say, I promise to buy X number of copies of the book on a sheet of paper. He promised to buy 1,000. And he did. He bought one for every one of his coaching clients. He had that many coaching clients, the big group coaching things he was doing. And so Raymond, great friend of ours, and we've done a lot of things together. I've spoken for him. He's spoken for me. We're writing a book together right now called The Power
so he's
of
one
Wow.
of those 2 books you're working on.
Yeah, The Power of Wow. How to wow your clients, your customers, your spouse, whatever. And when you wow somebody, they talk about it. And so we collected all these stories from like the Ritz-Carlton hotels, from this university that wows everybody, a friend of ours runs. And so Raymond's a good friend. But it's right. Having a book is a good idea, by the way. And Raymond teaches that because it gives you credibility as an expert.
So I love that you're doing The Power of Wow, because he did a session with our community on that, which really hit home with me. And that's literally one of our job positions now. We have someone whose job is to find wows for our clients in our business and figure out how can we change what is just a normal meeting with us to how can it become a wow experience. So I'm looking forward to that book.
Yeah, he is a director of wow in his company. And they found, how do we create more wows and how do we remove unwows? Because I remember he told this story early on where he called his own company, and it was one of those press this for number for that person and this, and half the people that didn't even work there anymore. He was having trouble getting through staff,
So out of all your results, everything you've done, what is something that makes you still emotional when you talk about it?
Well, I think some of the results of Chicken Soup for the Soul, for example, we have documented letters and emails from 2,000 teenagers who didn't commit suicide because of our Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul books. And we did, I think, 9 books in that series. And so that, just knowing that there's 2,000 people alive because of something you did that would have committed suicide otherwise, pretty amazing. And then I remember walking through a hotel in New York. Mark and I were receiving an award for Book of the Year or something. And we were in this hotel and we're coming in, and there's this girl with her parents in the lobby. This is at night, like about 10 o'clock, and she's bald. So figured she's going through chemo. So we went over and just kind of started talking. We're going to give her a book, send her a book. And turns out they had already been reading Chicken Soup for the Soul books when she was going through chemo as a way of helping her get her mind off how shitty her body felt, in terms of all the chemicals when they were doing that. And moments like that, where they say, you made it possible. My mother was dying. I was reading your stories to her, in her hospice, and things like that, I think, are the things that make me feel the most emotional in relation to the work I've done. And then obviously there's people who've left abusive relationships because of the Success Principles book that we did. There's people that have started businesses created magazines, made movies, got into movies, became singers. You know, I mean, I have a list of celebrities that have been in my life that I've helped that are, I won't mention names, but because they asked me not to, but it's really fulfilling to know that I've been part of their career. It's a lot of fun to know that.
Oh, this is a perfect segue into, because I wanted to ask you about, you've taught people about how to define success, but how has your definition of success evolved, and especially with experiences like this?
I started out, I think, like most people, thinking success meant having a lot of money, being well known, being able to go on vacation when you wanted, you know, freedom, power, all that stuff. And that worked for me for a while. And then success became more about certain results, like sell 1 million books. And it evolved eventually into fulfilling my soul's purpose. So I believe everyone has a purpose, and that you're successful if you fulfill the purpose that you were born with to fulfill. Some of us were born to be doctors and healers. Some of us were born to do the work you and I do. Some of us were born to be chefs and cooks and bakers, and some were born to be mechanics. That's why they love to work on cars and fix airplanes and invent vacuum cleaners like Dyson, you know, whatever. So the reality is, if you're doing that, number one, you're going to feel joy because you're doing what you love to do. And I believe joy is a feedback system that we've been born with that tells us we're on course. So for me, if you're fulfilling your purpose, doesn't mean you're going to be necessarily rich or well known, but you're doing the thing that brings you the greatest joy, and you're coming from a place of service rather than greed, then I think that you are very successful. So I strive now to do that in my own life, and also the people I train to help them realize that's really what their purpose is, to fulfill their purpose. That's what success is.
So, for someone who's listening to this and kind of going, I don't know what my purpose is, what would you tell them?
Well, this may sound self-serving, but I would say, number one, in my book, The Success Principles, there's a chapter on that. And there's a couple of things you can do. Number one, there is I call it paper and pencil version, where you think of two qualities that are uniquely you. So for me, it's love and joy. I'm a very loving person. I'm irreverently humorous quite a bit, you know, which I love and people like. And I love to be around people who are funny and have fun and enjoy life and so forth. Uh, then what are two ways you most love to express those qualities? So for me, it's teaching and inspiring and empowering. So inspiring people, Chicken Soup for the Soul; empowering, the Success Principles, seminars, book, etc., to live their highest vision in a context of love and joy. So what would the world look like if you could wave a magic wand, everyone in the world would, now the world would be perfect according to you, what would it be? And for me, it's everyone's living their highest vision, their purpose. And then you put all that together. So two qualities, love and joy, two ways to express that you love to do the most, inspiring and empowering. How would the world be? Everyone's living their highest vision in the context of love and joy. That's my purpose. Now, the other thing you could do is a guided visualization, which I have available on a program called Awakening Power, which you can get from my website, jack@jackcanfield.com. And that's where, you know, it's a standard kind of thing. You climb up a mountain. Whenever you go up, you go to a higher level of consciousness. You're in a temple. An angel comes down, gives you a golden box, and in that box, there's an object that represents and symbolizes your life purpose. So for me, it'd probably be a heart. I once had a dancing frog.
Right.
That was the joy part.
Right.
And then you ask the guardian angel, what does all this mean? You have a conversation. You come back. You draw your purpose, so you remember it. And then a lot of people will actually go buy something. I have a golden heart on my desk to remind me that that's my purpose. And I have the word joy and a rock. So those two sit next to each other on my desk. We had one guy got a rainbow, and this is the guy who argues in front of the Supreme Court in America, a Republican actually, and conservative. And he went home and he actually knitted a shawl in the colors of the rainbow, because that's what he was given, was a shawl to put around his head. He put it in a box frame behind his desk in Washington, in his office with all the mahogany and all that stuff. That's what's there. And everyone always asks him about it. And he unabashedly talked about it. but that's what he's doing. He's bringing uh, consciousness to the Supreme Court process when the argues case is there. So those are the two major ways. The third way is also in my book. It's called a joy review. Go back to your life and ask yourself, when was I the happiest? When did I experience the most joy? And for me, it was whenever I was teaching. It was whenever I taught high school, I taught teachers, I teach workshops, I'm teaching right now. So I'm happy doing that. I'm happy when I'm writing books because I'm teaching. And so if I was doing something else, like trying to run the financial part of my company, I get really bored. I don't like it. That's why I have someone who does that. This is what Raymond teaches: do what you love, hire people that do what you don't love, that they love to do. Then everything works.
That's brilliant. And just to summarize, first off, we'll link to all those books and resources and your website in the show notes so everyone can go and get them. But so basically, the first exercise is to identify what are my two things that best describe me, and how do I best, the two qualities, and then how do I best express them, and wave a magic wand. And if the world was my ideal version, what would that be? And kind of figure it out from there.
Sure.
Or the guided meditation, which we'll link to so people can do that, or the third exercise here to get that
review.
Yeah, exactly. To review your life and find when was I at my happiest.
And that's all in the second chapter of my book, because the first chapter is take 100% responsibility for your life. Because if you don't do that, the whole thing's moot. The second chapter is called, be clear why you're here. That's about life purpose. Because if you don't know that, then you're going to set goals that are not aligned with that purpose. And as I think Stephen Covey said, you don't want to get to the top of the ladder and find out it was leaning against the wrong wall. And a lot of people do. They make a lot of money. There's a lot of billionaires. I live in a wealthy neighborhood. I know some of them. They're not happy. They're drinking all the time. They're taking drugs. Their kids are not doing well because they thought the money was going to do it for them, and it didn't. And I tell a story that's very interesting in my book about a guy named Ken Behring, Behring, and he was a guy who became worth $600 million. That's a lot of money, almost half a billionaire. And he was unhappy. And I met him when he was giving a speech about the 4 stages of his life. He said the first stage was stuff. He thought stuff would make him happy. He had the car, the house, he had a private airplane, he had a yacht, he had all the things, exotic car collection, not happy. Second stage, better stuff, bigger house, better cars, bigger plane, all that, still not happy. Third stage, so maybe I'm buying the wrong stuff. That's when he bought the Seattle Seahawks football team with a couple of his friends, thinking if I own a football team, I'd be happy. Wasn't happy. Then a friend called him and said, I'm going to be flying over to Bosnia-Herzegovina, where these kids have lost their legs from landmines. Some of them were born genetically that way. We're going to give them wheelchairs. We're going to hand out 40 wheelchairs. You want to come? He said, sure. So they get on the plane. They land at the tarmac. They're putting kids in wheelchairs. And he picks up this one kid, puts him in a wheelchair, starts to leave. The kid grabs his leg, doesn't want him to leave. And through an interpreter and through tears, he said, please don't leave yet. I want to memorize your face. Because when we meet again in heaven, I want to thank you one more time. And he said, in that moment, I burst out in tears. I felt the greatest joy I'd ever felt in my life. And that's when he came home and started the Ken Behring Wheelchair Foundation. He's given away over 40,000 wheelchairs to kids all around the world. He found his purpose. His purpose wasn't owning a football team. It wasn't real estate, which is how he made his money. It was philanthropy and helping kids who are disabled be able to function in the world.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, because you've obviously worked with and know so many people like that. Well, what have you found as a common theme that ties together, the most successful people in the world?
I would say they have a vision of what success is for them, what they want to accomplish. It's a passion, and you can be passionate about real estate. I mean, I know many people that are, and they do it very successful. You can be passionate about television. You can be passionate about what you and I do. People are passionate about nutrition and curing people from cancer, and passionate about being police officers. We have some great police officers. There's some are not, obviously, in any profession. You're going to have people abuse it. But if you're doing what you love, I think they found a way to do what they love and monetize it. The Japanese talk about this thing called ikigai, which is like, what do you love to do? Can you do it well? Will people pay for it? And do they need it and want it? And if you can put all that together, find a way to monetize. Bill Gates loved to figure out how to make computers work better and solve problems for people with programming, and it worked really well for him. But he knows how to invent cars and how to build assembly lines that work, and so did Henry Ford. And they love solving those problems. So I think trusting yourself. Most of us got talked out of what we wanted to do. Like, I have two sons. Well, I have three sons, but two of them, well, all three of them are in music, actually. One's a rap singer, one's a drummer, and the other is works in retail, but he's a member of a chorus that sings on the weekends. And they pursued what they loved, and literally their mother tried to talk them out of it a couple of times. You can't make a living in music. Nobody does. And they're not making a lot of money, but they are super happy and they're successful in their world. Like, my son is well known in San Francisco. He's done 9 rap albums. He DJs. He's got a recording studio. My son, the drummer's in New York. He has a band. They break even when they tour, but he tours 4 times a year and has a great time. And then my other son loves to sing and does it really well with his chorus that sings all the time. So basically, I think people that are super successful love the game. Sometimes it's the game. Sometimes it's the actual doing of it. I know this Scott Cooper, who's a director that I saw a movie of just recently. I mentioned it to you before he came on air, of Springsteen, Bruce Springsteen. He said, I love directing people. He said, most directors don't really like the directing part. They like getting the sing, they like the script, they like blocking the scenes and all that kind of stuff. But working with actors is a real pain in the butt. He says, I love it. So he's made several movies that people in them, the actors, have won Oscars because he loves what he does. So if you love what you do and you do it well and you continue to get better at it, I think that's the other thing. This continuing and never-ending improvement concept. Tony Robbins came up with the CANI after the Japanese KENI, which means constant never-ending improvement. And so basically, if you keep learning, I mean, I still watch TED Talks and TEDx Talks and read books. And I'm curious. I want to know, how can I do anything better? How can I cook my salmon better? Whatever. That sense of just wanting to do it well. I think that's a big piece of it for people that are successful.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanted to hear about your company, about your journey, because obviously you started as this tiny little business trying to get the first book done. How have you implemented, this concept of never-ending improvement into growing into what it's become, and the movement and legacy that you're leaving behind?
Well, I still get better at writing. I mean, I subscribed to Writer's Digest for a number of years. I went to writers' conferences. I read books on writing. I remember speaking at the Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Conference. And before I went, I bought 2 books on writing children's books, so I know what the hell they were all about. The average children's book is 32 pages long. It's only about 4 to 5 sentences per page, blah, 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 blah. And so I've written 2 children's books, co-authored it with a woman. They've both done very, very well. But I didn't know how to do that before I knew how to do it, so constantly learning. I've written 1 semi-memoirish novel called The Gold Motorcycle Gang, which is about me being one of the things that people don't realize about purpose is, I think we decide our purpose before we're born. So for some people, that's too woo-woo. But for me, I have a memory of choosing to be born, which happened in a workshop where we were meditating and visualizing and so forth, and chose to come down to serve the earth. We were floating through space. We're like a mystery school up in the ethers in between lives. And it was World War II. I was born in 1944. I looked out on Earth and there's atomic bombs going off and fighting in Germany and Italy. And I went, I'm going down to help out. And it was kind of like they're going, you're being codependent, Canfield. I didn't have a name yet, but well, you don't go down there. And I said, I'm going. And every once in a while, I meet another person who I think was in that group who came with me. And we call it the Gold Motorcycle Gang. So for our Transformational Leadership Council, our logo is kind of like the Harley Davidson thing. It's a heart coming off it, like the Harley Davidson logo. And when people have attended 2 years of meetings, we give them a gold coin that has that logo on it. That says TLC and has the logo of the wings, and that all came from the gold motorcycle. And for years, I bought these little gold motorcycles I could get from Japan. I'd give them to people, and that's how that came about.
Now we're talking about how you use the constant improvement concept as you've been developing your company.
So basically, I would tell my staff, any seminar you want to take, go take it. I'll pay for it. So we get better at what we do, whether it's marketing, sales, delivering on services. We would have meetings every month, sometimes every week. Originally, we were all in one office in Santa Barbara. I hired all these young women that kind of got married to guys who didn't live here, so our company became more virtual. People living, within 6 cities away, so we get together occasionally. But always knowing get better, get better, get better, get better. And so people would take seminars on marketing, on consciousness, on meditation, whatever. And I'm a big believer in everyone growing. And for myself, I probably take 6 live seminars a year. I do meditation retreats. I work on myself physically. I do yoga and work out with a trainer twice a week and so forth. And I think also we became very focused on nutrition in our company. We actually hired a cook for a couple of years to cook our lunches for us, all organic and things like that. Everyone was getting fat, so we decided to stop doing that.
No. So, but one fear I know a lot of entrepreneurs have when it comes to developing their staff like that, if I was going to send them to all these seminars, what if I do that
Right.
and then they take all that and they leave, or they ask for too much of a salary raise or whatever it can be? Well, what do you say to entrepreneurs when they have that reaction?
Number one, if you provide a really great working experience and they're empowered to make decisions, you're not micromanaging them, and they're learning and growing, and you're giving them a fair wage. We develop profit sharing in our company. So there's a profit at the end of the year, hopefully, every year. And normally that would go to the owner, which would be me. But we took a percentage of that and divided that evenly when I say evenly, among the staff. There was a formula where it was a combination of how many years have you been here, what is your salary, and what did you do that was amazing this year. And if you did something that really made a big difference to the whole company, so those 3 things would be taken into consideration, and then we would bonus everybody. Sometimes people's bonuses were like $50,000 for people who were making $50,000 or $60,000 a year. So, and I never had anyone leave and take our stuff and go do it. It just never happened. When we quit, the big thing was when we downsized the company, everyone was upset because they loved working here. Now, fortunately, everyone who left is making more money now than they were here because we helped them transition. One of my staff who was making 60,000 a year is now making 200,000 a year, working as an assistant to a president of a university.
Oh, nice. Nice. And they probably were worth that before, but they loved working with you because of that experience you'd been giving them.
Yeah, and we developed a family, and it's like, who wants to leave their family? I mean, obviously, if you get married, you leave your immediate family. But I think if you create a working condition, fair wage, you're open to feedback, you're not an asshole in terms of being a manager.
See, that's my problem, but I'll work on that.
People want to be empowered. They want to be listened to. So we would start all of our meetings with something called a heart talk, which I learned from somebody a long time ago, where we had these little hearts, like a beanbag heart, and we'd pass it around. And when it was your turn, you'd hold the heart and you'd share whatever you wanted to share. And sometimes we'd have a theme. What's one thing we're not paying attention to that we need to? What's your biggest concern? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate working here? What would take it from a whatever number to a 10? And if you ask that question enough, people say, well, it's an 8, but what would make it a 10 is if you didn't micromanage this, or if you gave me more resources, or if we didn't have so many meetings so I could actually get the work done, whatever it might be. Then they feel heard, they feel empowered. And, so I think when people are growing and they're happy and they know that their growth is a result of working with you and for you, and they're surrounded, one thing about our company, we attracted a lot of interesting people. And so my staff loved to be with them. Almost everyone that got married met their spouse in one of our seminars, what they were assisting at.
Wow, that's really cool. And it goes back what you were saying there about that heart talk goes back to what you were saying before about getting feedback, right? If you'd been afraid to hear you're micromanaging too much, you wouldn't have been able to fix it.
I tell this to people about their relationships with their spouse, that if you don't ask your wife on a regular basis on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the quality of our relationship? And then if anything less than a 10, what would it take to make it a 10? You're the only one that doesn't know. Her sister knows, her mother knows, her best friends know, people at the nail salon know. She'll tell everyone but you. And then you're the only one that can fix it. So what's the point? You got to be willing to take the feedback. And is all feedback accurate? No. Do you have to do it? No. But at least you're aware of what's possible and what's missing for them. And then how can we work to make sure we heal that? For example, my current wife, we've been married 25 years now. When we first met, she was somebody who wasn't very wealthy, lower middle class. I was at the height of my career, and she felt intimidated by that. And when I would travel, she would get really upset. You need to spend more time with me. I said, no, you need to make more friends. And so basically that's really what did need to happen. And she did. And now she has more friends than I do. It's like just last night she was out with one of her girlfriends eating dinner. But the point being that not all feedback is accurate. Sometimes you have to push back. But in general, if she hadn't shared that with me, I wouldn't know she was unhappy. I want my wife to be happy.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you still helped fix it, right? It just wasn't on you. It was she had to do that, and you gave her then the space to do that.
Exactly.
All right. So we always end every podcast episode with a little rapid fire round. So 5-6 quick questions. So are you ready?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. So just first thing that comes to mind, what is the worst advice you've ever heard about motivation?
I would say it has to do with when people are told that they have to work hard, but they're not also told that something they love, then they'll often work really hard doing something that they don't love in order to be successful. So if you're getting half of the truth, I think that doesn't work very well for people. I see a lot of people, busting their hump and getting some success, but they're not happy. So that's the thing I would say is the worst advice.
Yeah, I like that. That's like my first job when I got out of high school. That was really the feeling. What is a quote you always keep within reach for a rainy day?
Well, my favorite quote is from Muhammad Ali. He says, impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a good one. What is one success myth you'd retire today?
I think a lot of people, including me, because I went to Harvard, I was surrounded by a lot of I wasn't the brightest person. I always say I graduated from the half of the class that made the top half possible, which was in the bottom half. But I thought for many years I had to be bright, gifted, born into a rich and successful family, which a lot of the people at Harvard were, and I wasn't. Or you have to be lucky. And, I've learned since then that if you understand principles like you and I teach, and you practice them with consistency over time, that's going to work. And then I would say the other thing is if you find a need and fill it. That's something I learned from W. Clement Stone. There's always needs evolving. Needs are evolving now. AI is changing a lot of stuff. There's new needs related to that. What can we do to help solve that problem for people?
Nice. Awesome. What one failure taught you the most?
I would say the biggest mistake I make and most authors make is trying to be all things to all people in one book. And I did a book once called Heart, Heart at Work, kind of playing off the hard at work metaphor. And it was a book that had a section for CEO type people, the C-suite, for the middle managers and the employees. And it was 3 books in one, didn't do well. Everyone said 2/3 of the book don't apply to me. I think people try to put too much in the one book, one thing, even one talk. Can't teach everything you know in 1 hour. And I think that I've had a number of failures aligned with that, mistake. Try to do too much in a workshop, too much in a book, try to teach my kids too much in one setting,
Yeah, I think every parent has done that one.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, final question here. What is one thing you're really excited about for yourself in the next 12 months?
Well, I mentioned that I'm retiring, and so far I haven't. I've done. I'm not on the road anymore, but I don't have as much free time as I thought I'd have, and that's because I haven't finished a couple of books that are hanging over my head. So finishing those two books and then having more time to do the things like literally take a day and just go downtown and wander around and not have any idea where I'm going to end up. Maybe I'll go to a movie, maybe I'll eat lunch, maybe I'll go to the beach, maybe I'll come home and watch football all day long. I don't know, but just that freedom to do whatever I want all day long. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Oh, well, you definitely deserve it with the impact you've had on everyone over the years. So let's hope that you actually give yourself that that space once you're done with the books.
Well, I intend to, but thanks for the encouragement.
So, is there anything last you'd like to leave our listeners with before we let you drift off to retirement?
Two things. One, self-serving again. Just go to my website, jack@jackcanfield.com, find out more of what we have available. The second thing is I always like to say to people, you have everything you need in order to achieve anything you want. You wouldn't have the desire to achieve it if it wasn't meant for you to do that. Now, you may have to learn some new things, develop some new skills, become licensed in something you're not yet, partner with somebody, build a team, all kinds of things that might have to happen. But you're never given a dream without the capacity to make it happen. So trust that. Trust yourself. Tune into your intuition. Tune into your inner voice. Too many of us are listening to the experts, parents, friends, judges, whatever, telling us who and what we should be. Trust yourself. Follow your inner guidance. But realize whatever it is that you're drawn to is also wanting you to do that. The universe needs what you have to give. If everyone did that, the world would work. All the functions would get fulfilled by the people doing what they love to do.
Oh, that's brilliant. So everyone listening, let's go out and do that. And we'll be linking to all those resources, all those books, all those audio, the guided meditation, all that in the show notes. So you can find them there. And Jack, I really appreciate you taking the time and joining us here today.
My pleasure, David. Again, really thanks for the opportunity.
All right, before we wrap up this episode with Jack Canfield, I have a very exciting new segment for you called What is the Difference That Makes the Difference? Because at the Swedish Wealth Institute, our driving question is always, what actually makes the difference between people who dream and people who transform their lives? So I wanted to take this moment to ask ourselves in this episode, what was the difference that made the difference for Jack Canfield? And there are a few things that I really want you to sit with, and of course, more importantly, act on. 1, he didn't just get lucky, he outlasted everyone. Jack and Mark were rejected 144 times with Chicken Soup for the Soul. Most people would give up easily after the first 5 to 10, if not after the first one. So the difference that made the difference? They chose belief as a decision, not a feeling. They used one simple rule: next. Every no wasn't the end. It was feedback that this wasn't the one yet. So your implementation, where in your life or business have you stopped at rejection 5 instead of 145? Pick one area and recommit. Next becomes the new standard. All right, number 2, they didn't just ship, they crafted and tested. So Chicken Soup wasn't lucky. They rewrote the stories 6 times. They read them out loud to check for the flow. They got at least 20 people to rate each story from 1 to 10. And they would cut even Jack's favorite stories if they weren't a 10. So remember what Jack said during the interview? Feedback is the breakfast of champions. He did this with his books, his talks, even his relationships, asking his teams and his wife on a scale of 1 to 10, what would make this a 10? So how do we implement this? Well, we choose one product, one talk, or your relationship, and ask on a scale of 1 to 10, where is this right now? If it's not a 10, ask the follow-up question, what would make it a 10? And listen without trying to defend, just take the feedback. All right, 3, he played the long game with consistent daily action. So the book Chicken Soup for the Soul didn't hit the bestseller list until 14 months after release. which means that they had to put in enormous effort. In that time, Jack and Mark ran the rule of 5. Every day they did at least 5 actions to move the book forward. It could be calls, media outreach, review copies, etc. I mean, over a year, that became more than 1,500 actions. That is the difference between a wish and a movement. So how do we implement this? Well, we define our own rule of 5 for our biggest goal. 5 outreach messages, 5 sales actions, 5 content pieces, whatever it is, do 5 things every single day for the next 30 days and see what it does for you. 4, he redefined success from money to purpose. Early on, success meant money, status, numbers. Today, Jack defined success as fulfilling the purpose you were born with and using joy as feedback that you're on the right path. So he gave us 3 practical ways to find that purpose. The first one was 2 core qualities, 2 favorite expressions, plus your ideal world, right? That magic wand exercise he talked about. The second is to do a guided visualization, that awakening your power. And 3 is to do a joy review. Look back at your life and say, when was I the happiest? So how do we implement this? Well, just take 10 minutes today. Now that you've listened to this episode, take 10 minutes and list 2 qualities that describe you at your best. 2 ways you love to express them. And if everyone lived their best life, what would the world look like? You'll be closer to your purpose than most people ever are. These things are the difference that made the difference for Jack Canfield. And now, speaking of different makers, our next episode is with Darren Winters, one of Europe's leading investment and trading mentors. Darren went from starting with very little to mastering the markets and teaching thousands how to avoid common beginner mistakes, use clear rule-based strategies, and build real wealth through smart investing rather than gambling. If you've ever wanted anyone to demystify investing and show you step by step how to approach the markets more intelligently, this is truly an episode you don't want to miss. So please make sure you follow and subscribe so you get Darren Winters' episode as soon as it's released. I'm Daniel Wood. Thank you again for listening to the Swedish Wealth Institute podcast. Now let's go implement one of these differences that makes the difference in your own life. Good luck.
The youngest kid I worked with was 8 years old, and I got him making money in 2 hours investing in the markets. I used to think you have to work hard to make a lot of money. You most definitely don't.
Darren Winters is an investment trainer who's taught large audiences practical trading methods for years. Today, he'll walk you through risk-aware setups and discipline.
You don't have to work hard to make money. If you have the right strategy, it can be very simple, very quick and easy to make money. What I think is probably the biggest opportunity in my lifetime to be investing in this, because the market's been going up, and there will be a huge stock market crash, and that is actually the best time to make money. There are people out there who make it complicated, and I think they deliberately try and make it complicated.